I did not raise my voice. I did not make a scene. I simply turned around, walked back to my car, and drove home in the dark. That was a Tuesday night in October. By Thursday morning, I had made exactly 3 phone calls. And by the following Monday, my son's entire world had begun to unravel, not because I destroyed it, but because he had built it on a foundation he thought would always hold him up. He was wrong about that. He was wrong about a lot of things. Let me go back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without the beginning. My name is not important. What matters is that I am 63 years old. I worked for 31 years as a civil engineer for the county, and I raised 2 children mostly on my own, after my wife passed from cancer when my son was 14 and my daughter was 11. I did not remarry. I did not take vacations. I drove the same truck for 12 years because I was putting every spare dollar into college funds, into the house, into the future I wanted my kids to have. My son is 34 now. He works in tech sales. He married a woman I will call his wife, and together they have a little boy named Cooper, who just turned 5. Cooper is the kind of child who still runs to the door when he hears your car pull up. He is the kind of child who draws you pictures and slides them under the bathroom door because he cannot wait until you come out to give it to you. Cooper is the best thing in my son's life, and I say that with full confidence that my son would agree with me, at least on that one point. The house my son lives in, the 4-bedroom colonial in a quiet suburb outside of Columbus, I helped him buy it. That is not a figure of speech. When he and his wife were looking, they were $47,000 short of what the bank required for the down payment. My son called me on a Sunday afternoon and explained the situation. He was embarrassed. I could hear it in his voice, and I told him not to be. I told him that is what fathers are for. I wired the money the following week, and I never brought it up again. Not once. A year after that, my son came to me with an idea. He and a colleague wanted to start a side business, a software consulting firm, he explained. Something they could build slowly while keeping their day jobs. He needed a co-signer on a small business line of credit. $40,000. I asked him to show me the business plan. He brought it over on a Saturday, and we sat at my kitchen table for 2 hours going through it. It was not a bad plan. His colleague seemed competent from what I could read. I signed. That was 3 years ago. The business had grown. My son had eventually left his salaried position to run it full-time. From what he told me during our calls, which had become less frequent as the months went on, things were going well. Revenue was up. They had hired 2 employees. He sounded proud when he talked about it, and I was proud of him. I told him so. What I did not know at the time, what I would not find out until everything collapsed, was how the money was actually being managed inside that business. But I am getting ahead of myself. The calls had dropped off gradually. When Cooper was born, I was over at their house twice a week, then once a week, then every other week. By the time Cooper turned 4, I was seeing my grandson maybe once a month, usually because I had driven to their neighborhood and texted my son to ask if I could stop by for an hour. He was always busy. His wife was always taking Cooper somewhere. There was always a reason, always a next time. I told myself it was normal. Men get busy. Families get busy. I was not going to be one of those fathers who guilts his son for having a full life. I kept my concerns to myself. I mowed my lawn. I had dinner with my sister on Fridays. I called my son every Sunday evening, and he answered about half the time. The Saturday everything changed, started like any other Saturday. I had been to the hardware store. I had a bag of mulch in the back of the truck, and I was driving home on Route 40 when I passed the street that leads to my son's neighborhood. On an impulse, I turned. It had been 3 weeks since I had seen Cooper. I thought I would knock on the door, see if the boy wanted to kick a soccer ball around in the backyard. I had not called ahead. That, in hindsight, was the only decision that changed everything. I pulled onto their street and immediately noticed the cars. There were cars parked along both sides from the corner all the way to their driveway. The driveway itself held 4 vehicles I did not recognize, and through the front window I could see lights and movement and the unmistakable shifting shapes of a party in progress. I sat in the truck for a moment. I thought perhaps it was a neighborhood event, a block party of some kind. Then I saw the banner. It was hung across the front porch railing, white letters on blue fabric, and it read, "Congrats on the big win, cheers to the team." I did not know what the big win was. I had not been told about any big win. I got out of the truck. I was wearing jeans and my work flannel because I had been to the hardware store. But I was clean. I was presentable. And I was not thinking about any of that. I was thinking about my son, my grandson, and why I had not received so much as a text message telling me that something worth celebrating had happened in their lives. I walked up the front steps and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and it was one of the colleagues, a young man I recognized vaguely from a company photo my son had once shown me on his phone. He looked surprised to see me. He stepped aside and called into the house. My son appeared from somewhere in the back. He was dressed well, a blazer over an open collar, holding a drink. He looked good. He looked successful. He looked like a man who had built something and was celebrating it with a crowd of people, none of whom included his father. He looked at me the way you look at someone who has shown up to the wrong address. "Dad," he said it quietly. Not warm, not cold, just flat. "Hey, son," I smiled. I was genuinely trying. I was in the neighborhood, saw the cars, thought I'd say hello. "What are we celebrating?" He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door partially closed behind him. That gesture told me everything. He did not want his guests to see this conversation. "We landed a big contract," he said. "A really big one." "Dad, this isn't really a good time." "I can see that," I said. "I'm not trying to crash the party. I just wanted to congratulate you. I didn't know about any contract. I was going to call you." "When?" He didn't answer that. "Is Cooper here?" I asked. I'd just like to say hi to him for a minute. Something shifted in his expression. Not guilt exactly. More like impatience. Like I was a problem he needed to manage before he could get back to the real evening. "Cooper's inside," he said. "But honestly, Dad, this crowd, these are clients, partners, people from the industry. It's not really your kind of crowd. I want to be very precise about this moment, because I have replayed it many times since then. Not your kind of crowd. I am a man who spent 31 years managing multi-million-dollar public infrastructure projects. I have sat in county commissioner meetings. I have presented before state review boards. I am not a man who cannot navigate a room full of 30-something tech professionals. My son knew this. He had watched me do it his entire life. What he meant, and we both understood what he meant, was that I did not belong there, that my presence was an inconvenience, that the man who had wired him $47,000 and signed his business credit line was welcome to exist somewhere out of sight, to be called on when needed and set aside when not. I looked at my son for a long moment. He met my eyes briefly and then looked past me at the street. "Okay," I said. That was all. I did not argue. I did not make him feel guilty on his porch in front of the crack of the open door. I said okay. I turned around. I walked back down the steps to my truck, and I drove home. I pulled into my garage, turned off the engine, and sat there for a while. It was dark in the garage and quiet, and I sat with my hands in my lap, and I thought about things. I thought about the 14-year-old boy who had cried at his mother's grave with his head against my shoulder. I thought about the college move-in day when I drove 6 hours in a rented van and carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs in August heat. I thought about the Sunday afternoon phone call, the embarrassed voice, the $47,000, the kitchen table, the business plan, the 2 hours, the signature. Then I went inside and made myself dinner, leftover soup. I ate it at the kitchen table where I had once helped my son plan his future. Then I washed the bowl and went to bed. I slept fine. That probably sounds strange, but I did. When you have made a decision, really made it, all the way down, there is a kind of peace in it. Monday morning I was up at 6. I made coffee and sat down at my desk with my laptop and my legal pad and began making notes. I am an engineer. I approach problems methodically. I wanted to be clear about what I was going to do and why, and I wanted to be certain I was doing it for the right reasons and not out of anger. By the time I had finished my second cup of coffee, I was satisfied. This was not anger. Anger passes. This was clarity. This was accounting. The first call was to my bank. I had set up an automatic monthly transfer, a contribution toward my son's mortgage that we had arranged quietly after the down payment. The original agreement was that it would help them through the first 3 years while the business got off the ground. The business was now 3 years old and, by my son's own account at the party, doing well enough to warrant a celebration full of clients and partners. The transfer was no longer necessary, and more importantly, it had never been the point. The point was to support my son. My son had made his position on my support quite clear on his porch on Saturday evening. I canceled the transfer. The customer service representative confirmed it was done. The second call was to the business bank, the institution that held the line of credit I had co-signed. I did not cancel anything. I could not unilaterally do that, and I was not looking to destroy him. I was looking to detach. What I did was submit the formal written request to begin the process of removing myself as guarantor. The loan officer explained that this would trigger a review and that the business would need to qualify on its own. I said I understood and that I would send the written request by end of day. I did. The third call was to my attorney, a woman I had worked with when I updated my estate documents 2 years ago. I told her what I needed. She asked me a few questions, made a few notes, and told me she would have something drafted within the week. She also told me something I had not expected, something that would become very significant later, but I did not know that yet. I went on with my week. I finished mulching the garden beds. I had dinner with my sister. She could tell something had happened and she asked me, and I told her. She did not say much for a moment. Then she said, "You raised that boy alone for 20 years, Robert. She is the only person who calls me Robert. You gave him everything." I told her that was not entirely true, that he had worked hard too, that there was more than one version of the story. She looked at me and said, "You are a better man than he deserves right now." I told her not to say that, but I appreciated it. On Thursday of that week, I received an email from the business bank. The review of the line of credit, triggered by my removal request, had surfaced some irregularities in the account activity. The bank's internal compliance team had flagged it. They were not asking me to do anything. They were informing me as the co-signer that an inquiry had been initiated. They used careful, corporate language, the kind of language that is designed to convey something serious without committing to specifics. I forwarded the email to my attorney. She called me back within the hour. She had already made some inquiries of her own, based on what she had found when drafting my documents earlier in the week. She spoke carefully and I listened carefully, and by the end of the call, I understood several things that I had not understood on Saturday evening when I stood on my son's porch in my work flannel. The business, the one I had helped capitalize, the one celebrating its big contract win, had a second signatory on the operating account. It was not my son's business partner. It was his wife. And over the past 18 months, a significant sum of money had moved from the business operating account into a personal account held solely in her name. The amounts were not random. They were structured, just below reporting thresholds, moved consistently on the last business day of each month. It is called structuring, and it is, depending on the intent, a federal offense. My attorney told me she was not accusing anyone of anything. She told me that this was what the compliance review had uncovered and that the bank had already contacted the relevant authorities. She told me I had done nothing wrong. She told me my request to remove myself as guarantor had, in a roundabout way, likely saved me from significant financial and legal exposure. She told me to do nothing, say nothing, and let the process unfold. I thanked her and hung up. I sat at my desk for a while. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. It was not satisfaction. I want to be careful about that, because I know how this kind of story can sound, and I do not want it to sound like I was happy. I was not happy. I was the grandfather of a 5-year-old boy named Cooper, who liked to slide drawings under bathroom doors, and none of what was unfolding was going to be good for Cooper. That was the first thing I felt. Grief for my grandson. The second thing I felt was something harder to name. Not vindication exactly. More like the particular sadness of being proven right about something you had hoped you were wrong about. My phone rang for the first time 11 days after I had stood on that porch. It was my son. I let it go to voicemail. He called again 20 minutes later. I let that go too. Then a text. "Dad, I need to talk to you. Please call me back." I put the phone face down on the desk and went to make dinner. By the next morning, I had 16 missed calls, not all from my son, some from his wife, one from a number I did not recognize, which turned out to be an attorney of their own, based on the voicemail. I did not return any of them. I called my own attorney and told her about the calls. She said I should not speak to anyone until she told me it was appropriate to do so. The calls kept coming. By the end of the following week, I had stopped counting. I will say that at some point, the total crossed 40. 40 phone calls from the man who had told me 11 days earlier that his party was not really my kind of crowd. I eventually called my son back, but only after my attorney confirmed that it was appropriate to do so and that anything I said in the call could be said plainly and without risk to me. I called him on a Wednesday evening. He answered on the first ring. His voice was different. It was the voice of a 14-year-old boy. It was the voice I had not heard in a long time. "Dad." He stopped. I could hear him trying to find words. "Dad, something has happened. With the business, with the account. I need." He stopped again. "I need you." I let that sit for a moment. "What happened to the account?" I asked, even though I knew. He told me. He told me everything, or at least his version of everything. He said he had not known about what his wife had been doing. He said he had trusted her with the bookkeeping because she had offered and he had been busy. He said, by the time he understood what was happening, too much time had passed. He said the bank had reported it. He said investigators had come to the house. He said he did not know what was going to happen next. He said Cooper was with his wife's mother, and he did not know when he would see his son. He cried. My son, who is 34 years old, cried on the phone with me. I did not tell him I had known for 3 weeks. I did not tell him about my attorney or the process I had initiated. I did not remind him of Saturday evening, the porch, the door pulled half closed, the words "not really your kind of crowd." I said, "I know, son." He said, "I need you to help me, Dad. And this is the part I want to be precise about, because I think it is the most important part of this story." I did not say yes immediately. I did not say, of course, and come rushing back to a relationship that had become, somewhere along the way, entirely one-directional. I also did not say no. I said something that I had thought about for 11 days, something I had written on my legal pad and crossed out and rewritten and thought about again. I said, "Before I can help you, I need you to understand something, and I need you to actually understand it, not just say you do because you need something from me." He said he was listening. I said, "I came to your house 3 weeks ago. I was wearing a flannel shirt because I had been to the hardware store. And you came out on the porch and you told me it wasn't my kind of crowd." Silence. "I walked back to my truck," I said, "and I drove home, and I sat in my garage, and I thought about everything I had given you, not to make you feel guilty, but because I needed to understand whether any of it meant anything to you." His breathing changed. "I'm not asking you to owe me," I said. "I never was. But I am asking you to see me, not when you need me, not as a cosigner or a cash wire, as your father, as a person, as someone who drove a 12-year-old truck so you could have a college fund, as someone who sat at his kitchen table and read your business plan on a Saturday morning because he believed in you." He said, "Dad, I'm sorry." I said, "I know you are. I don't know what happened. I got so caught up in trying to look like I had it together. In front of those people, those clients. I didn't want them to see." He stopped. "To see your father in a flannel shirt," I said. "Yes," he said, very quietly. I told him that I understood that. I told him that I was not without compassion for the position he had been in, for the pressures of building something, for the desire to appear successful in front of people whose opinion he valued. I told him that I had been 34 once and had cared very much about appearances, and had learned, eventually, that appearances are exactly what they sound like, a surface with nothing behind it. Then I told him what I was and was not willing to do. I was not willing to simply return to the arrangement we'd had before. I was not going to restore the automatic transfer. I was not going to co-sign anything else. I was not going to be a financial instrument that was filed away between uses and pulled out when necessary. What I was willing to do was be his father. I was willing to talk to my attorney on his behalf, to see what could be done to protect him from the consequences of decisions he claimed he had not been party to. I was willing to have him come to my house, not to ask for anything, just to sit at the kitchen table where we had once spent a Saturday morning together and talk. I was willing to be the kind of father I had always tried to be, if he was willing to be the kind of son he had once been. Before the blazer and the clients and the party with the banner on the porch, he said yes. He did not say it quickly. He thought about it, and I let him think, and then he said yes. I said, "Come Saturday. I'll make coffee." Cooper came with him. I had not expected that. And when I opened the front door and saw that little boy standing on my porch with his arms already reaching up, something in me that had been tight for weeks simply let go. I picked him up and he put his face against my neck and said, "Grandpa, Dad said you were sad." I said I had been a little sad. He patted my back in a way that was so purely adult and so purely 5 years old at the same time that I had to laugh. "I'm here now," he said. Like that settled it. Maybe it did. My son and I sat at the kitchen table for 3 hours that Saturday. We drank coffee and we talked, and sometimes we sat without talking, and neither of those things felt wrong. He told me things he had not told me in years, about the pressure he had felt to succeed, about the way the business had started to consume him, about how he had let his wife take over more and more of the finances because it was one less thing to manage, and he had trusted her completely. He said he still did not fully understand everything she had done or why. He said there were things about his marriage he was still trying to understand. I told him that whatever happened with the legal situation, I would not abandon him. I told him that is not what fathers do. I told him that I also needed him to understand that my presence in his life was not contingent on what I could provide financially, and that if he ever forgot that again, I would not wait 40 phone calls to have this conversation. We would have it immediately. He nodded. He looked like the boy he used to be, before everything. There is a thing that happens to men, I think, especially men who are trying very hard to build something and prove something and become something. They start managing the people in their lives the way they manage everything else, by utility. This person is useful to me in this way. This person I can call when I need this thing. It is not malicious. It is habitual. It is also, I would argue, a kind of loneliness, to live entirely inside a transactional relationship with the world, including with your own father. I do not know what is going to happen with the legal situation. My attorney is working on it. There are complexities I am not at liberty to describe. What I can say is that the business line of credit has been closed, the co-senior liability has been addressed, and I am no longer financially entangled in anything I did not choose to be entangled in. What I am entangled in is family. Irreversibly, gratefully, appropriately entangled in family. Cooper comes to my house every other Saturday now. He has his own drawer in my kitchen, a small one, low enough for him to reach, where he keeps a set of crayons and a pad of paper. When he arrives, he goes straight to that drawer like it is the most natural thing in the world, like it has always been his. Maybe it has. My son calls me every Sunday evening. He always answers now. I still drive the same truck. It has 160,000 miles on it and it runs just fine. I did not drive it for 12 years to teach my son a lesson. I drove it because some things matter more than appearances. And I knew that even when I was young, even when it was harder to know, even when the world was pressing in and telling me to look the part. I hope my son is learning that now. I believe he is. Some lessons take longer than others. Some lessons have to arrive the way that Tuesday night arrived, in the form of a porch door, pulled half closed, and a father who turned around, walked quietly to his truck, and drove home in the dark. That is the whole story. Or at least the part I am ready to tell. If any of this sounds familiar to you, if you have a parent you have been managing instead of loving, or a child you have been funding instead of seeing, then I hope you will not wait for the 40 phone calls. I hope you will pick up the phone before it gets to that. I hope you will go to the kitchen table while there is still coffee in the pot. It is never too late, but it does not stay not too late forever. That is what I know. At 63, having worked 31 years and raised 2 children and driven the same truck for 12 years, and sat alone in a dark garage on a Tuesday night and made a decision. Some crowds are not worth belonging to. The people who love you, the real ones, will never make you feel like you do not.